Yeah. Well, thank you for saying all those kind words, and thank you all for being here. It really means a lot. Also for our 35mm prints to be shown. It was. I had been a fan of Dennis Johnson's for a long time, and similar to you, I didn't know anything about the book when I picked it up, and I just picked it up and then I promptly fell in love with it. But I didn't think about it as a movie until much later. You know, years and years later, I made a film called Jockey, and there were some producers, Marissa McMahon, Ashley Schlager, and Will Janowitz, who were producers on the film. They had the rights to the book and had been trying to find someone to make it, and they reached out and they asked me if I was interested. And then I went back and read it again as, like, thinking about it as a movie. And at first, it did strike me in the same way as you, like, this doesn't feel like it's adaptable. But then there was just so much beauty and poeticity to it, and it just seemed so rich for a film adaptation, and just in terms of the world. And it was really the story of Robert De Niro at the heart of it that I was just like, it felt like a beautiful thing to be able to show this very simple life and treat it with all of the depth and power that it actually had, even though on the surface it might not seem that way.
Let's talk a little bit about casting, because we have stars, like genuine bona fide movie stars here on stage, but they blend in so beautifully with faces, that are unfamiliar to us. I'm curious, like, let's start with the stars, since we've got you all here. Like, how do you cast Robert? Were there doubts? Did you always know?
It's a really tough role to try and think about, because it's got to be somebody who fits into this world and you believe could be a lover, but then also somebody who's an amazing actor, and somebody who can age up and age down, and then also on a very emotional side can play somebody tough and masculine, but also somebody very tender and soft, and that you can believe could be chopping down a tree, but then also kind of birthing a baby. And yes.
I'm your guy.
Joel, kind of like coming to this project, what was the attraction for you? I mean, this movie kind of like lives on the shoulders of this character, and it's not the first time I feel like you've played someone who's just kind of like got his hands on the earth. It's like these kind of blue collar, everyday men. But
I feel in many ways, and I know this of a lot of Australian actors I know, we almost feel guilty that we're actors, that we should be doing something more, hardworking, and certainly and by the way, I actually more and more as I get older believe that entertaining people and telling stories is an absolutely dignified pursuit, whereas I used to be like, I'm just an actor, and it's, what am I doing for the world, But my grandfather and my great-grandfather were farmers, and my father went in a different direction, and I always felt like part of my life was meant to head down that road. And I was given big fat hands that could have, definitely, I find it hard to text, but maybe I could have built things once upon a time. But I felt like this role was sort of built for me in other ways. Emotionally, I'm a dad and I'm a husband, and my greatest fear is the things that happen to Robert in this film. So I wasn't so much worried about plugging into the world of the film and pulling the trick of being the guy and labouring. It was more for me about the rumination of character and relationships. But I had already fallen in love with the novella as well. And when Clint reached out to me, I already knew the material, and what made me drawn to it was him as a filmmaker, his adaptation of this incredibly complex theme, piece of writing, and that I got to play this character that more than most characters I've ever played in many years. I felt like this is, and it sounds like a really rudimentary word, but that felt suitable, a suitable connection for who I am at this point in my life.
I mean, seeing you here on stage, you look younger than the character we see on the screen.
I've been drinking a lot less alcohol. It really works for me. I think I'm in the middle of my life. I'm 51 now, and I think I need to get off the salts for a little while. Helps a little bit.
But it's interesting how unglamorous this is, and Felicity, that's true, for you too. Like, you're radiant here on stage, and there's something like, where you're kind of stripping some of that away to be authentic. I think, to the character, to the moment, to the accents. Like I'm thinking like this is a movie that's kind of like before TikTok, before television, before plastic, before sliced bread. Like this is like before the invention of sliced bread. It's like this is that kind of and it's getting into the headspace of people who kind of like the pace is different, the world is different, what their references are, what the references aren't. They don't have any pop culture. It's like, I shouldn't be the one talking, but like I kind of want to hear. I kind of want to hear like Felicity, Joel, Bill, like to get into the headspace that the movie requires, because I think so much of the performance is this kind of just being present with the character and where they are in the moment, and kind of living the characters in a way that seems a little different from a lot of interpretation of screenplay, what a lot of acting requires. But what was that like? I mean, how did you kind of put yourself in that place that the role required?
I think the film has, the thing that first attracted me to it was this little family at the core, and their struggle really. They, as you said at the beginning of the film, they're having a difficult time, and they're struggling financially, and that somehow the specificity of their situation really resonated. And I think for us on the day-to-day of presenting them, so to speak, was not to present them, was to, as you say, was just, it's as though you get these little snippets into their lives. And so you want to feel that it's as naturalistic and easy and unpretentious as possible. And as you say, these people, they're not self-aware probably in the same way that we are now. They're not used to seeing their image. They're definitely in a space in time where everything is about survival. Is what can I do to feed my family, to make sure that we get through the next day, and that was very much at the core of Gladys. She's an absolute pragmatist. It's just what can we do in this situation to make the best of what we've got in pretty difficult circumstances.
It's interesting. I remember with the movie Brokeback Mountain, like the Heath Ledger character in that movie being like someone I recognized from real life, this kind of stoic, unexpressive man that like exists in the world and seldom exists on screen because characters are constantly telling us what they're thinking and feeling. But like I feel like that's there's a relation between that kind of portrayal and what we get from Robert. It's like he opens up, I think, over the course of the film to that beautiful moment, series of scenes with Carrie Condon, but like because a lot of it is not verbal, it's like how did you, Joel, kind of interpret what's being asked of the character?
I think there's, look at most films and they're about, mainly about people doing extraordinary things. They're about generals or presidents or people doing things that we go to the cinema and project ourselves in to see that someone maybe more fantastic than us. And this film really celebrates the ordinary human being, which I think most of us believe we are. And within an ordinary life, it's amazing that you often don't realise how epic the things you go through are in terms of feeling. And I think, to fall in love is such a peak in your life. To become a parent, is such a devastatingly beautiful, complex responsibility, and then to experience grief is one of the big things that most of us, if we live long enough, will have someone we love taken away from us. So I think ordinary life is more Shakespearean than you really sort of maybe assess in your own sense of your own values. And I think the audience can relate to that. So what Robert goes through, I think people can reach in and say, I know what that feels like. And of course we have Will Patton's lovely narration that helps not just jump ahead in time to take us through this decades-long journey, but also occasionally give you a sense of what's in Robert's mind. But I feel like even with very few words, I think Robert becomes a very relatable man that a lot of us might know. I certainly know a lot of them that feel a lot, that the well runs very, very deep, but it often doesn't spill to the surface. And when it does, it means something. And so I think the audience can really track that without him kind of contradicting his own character of substance.
Bill, your character is kind of the opposite in that he's one of the more loquacious characters in the movie. And it's interesting how half of the dialogue, while it makes sense to you, the actor, and the character, is not entirely decipherable to us. It's like, I mean, just talk a little bit about kind of like, who this guy is, and I have a feeling that your performance is very different from the other actors around you, because you're getting to speak and sing and kind of like, be exuberant, I guess, in a way that others don't.
What's the question?
That's a good question. I like the idea of just like setting up an idea and hoping that it inspires something. Maybe that
well, I was thinking about when I read the script. If the script's good, I'm in. And this is a beautiful script. It read like it looks, and in my mind's eye, I saw this movie. So, and I love the character, but I could be wrong. When Arn comes in, he's described as an old codger. Isn't he?
A gap out.
I think so. That got my attention.
That's something you hadn't done before and you could do here. What is that accent and where does it come from?
I immediately heard Arn having a southern accent, and particularly that lovely round deep south accent as opposed to the hard R's. And I don't know why. And we talked on the phone, you said, yeah, why not?
Yeah, it sounded nice. I don't know why I didn't think about it that way in listening, hearing him and writing it, and then he tried out this like almost very dignified southern accent that was just so perfect for the character. Thinking about somebody character who fits as well here, like in this world of vlogging as he might on a whaling ship, or working in New York doing something. You could just imagine this guy anywhere in that world, except for Kansas.
I definitely think there's a prequel in here that sets up why Arn has such an issue with Minnesota.
What did the script look like? I mean, it can't have looked like this. I think, obviously, you have to have planned everything that we see here, but there must have been construction kind of like, in editing and such. Bill's part remains pretty robust, but there are people like Clint Bentley, who's another movie star, who's in it for just enough to teach the lesson of characters can die, kind of just like that in this time period or whatever. But how much was the script a blueprint for what we see, and how much was
It's hard to say because it was a constant rewriting place. There was a very solid script going in, and some things were very solidly scripted in terms of the shot where the camera's on the tree and the tree falls down was in the script, and the conversations the conversation on the balcony was kind of that verbatim. And then there were other things, especially a lot of stuff that we did at home in the cabin with Joel and Felicity. We just kind of felt our way through them and had scenes, but then we were constantly feeling like what was the way to get around this, or there was a whole great scene, but then the kid didn't want to do it that day, so we're like, well, how do we do this?
Can we talk a little bit about the kid? And Alfonso, I kind of want to hear kind of your process, because some of these shots are very kind of deliberately composed, and some of them have to have that kind of the fluidity that we see kind of in Emmanuel Lubezki and kind of some of the Terrence Malick movies where you're following. And I think with the kid, the chicken thing, the throwing the cup in, like I don't know how much it just feels so spontaneous.
I followed a lot of chickens. I feel like for us it was like, we wanted, Clint and I talked a lot about how to make this movie look like watching someone's memories. And I feel like memories, we remember things in a different way. Some things we remember in a very fluid way that you don't really necessarily even remember where you were. Some things you remember in a way that is basically about where you were, what exactly we were seeing, like you're seeing through the window or something like that. So we wanted to have a very mixed language in that term. And I feel like that helped with situations like the kids or the animals, that we had to be more open to what they would give us. And I think like we did a bit on Jockey. I feel like Clint is a master on allowing that to happen and realizing that, okay, this is not working the way we're supposed to. The kid is supposed to be happy, but the kid's crying. Let's go for it. And I feel like Felicity and Joe did an amazing job also on picking up on that and making the scene work with whatever that kid was giving us. And I feel like the language, the handheld that really inhabits those moments also allowed for us to just like follow them around for like half an hour nonstop and see what happens. And I feel like those little moments are a lot from that. But we wanted also to have a lot of really planned shots, like that tree falling down where the camera is attached to the tree, and it's just like a mix of everything.
For the actors, any of you could kind of answer this, but like, what is it like acting in this film for that? Because we don't know as an audience, is everything one take? Is there 70 takes? Is it very? I mean, like, how is Clint finding the performance, and like, are you even kind of aware of what's being collected, or are there enough? I mean, it's kind of freeform enough in certain scenes where you just, I guess, have to kind of constantly be the character and trust that one of these takes is going to do justice to the
And just the editing process.
It was a very much a 360-degree world for the most part. Almost every set, the cabin you could have lived in and functioned and survived in there. Very few power lines even visible from where we were. All the stuff in the forests, and so there was a sense that if we did want to run off and chase chickens and allow Katie, the little character of Katie, to dictate the scene, we could move in any which way as long as the crew kept out of the shot. And that really helps for me. My whole life on screen always is helped by knowing that I'm not having to pretend things are there when they're not there, and know that you can pick up any prop, and there was a great amount of freedom to that, and it very much felt like there was a good momentum to the shooting. We weren't able to luxuriate, we didn't have an abundance of days, but it never felt like we were racing or missing things. And there was, for example, the scene with Carrie and I on the watchtower, on the lookout tower at the end. The sun was very bright in our face, and we all just decided to sit and wait an hour for the light to be right, knowing that we would only have a window of a couple of hours ultimately to shoot the entire scene. But there was a confidence to the approach of sitting and waiting for the right moments at times as well. So we never, it didn't feel like we were being chased down the road by a bear. But it also, felt like a good momentum.
I love that scene. I just love everything that character kind of gives Robert, that he kind of needs, to sort of move past his grief. But I also really like the scene where he picks her up on the carriage, and there's just such an interesting choice with the camera work in that scene. Where you start on Joel, you go to Carrie, and kind of drift back to Joel, and something has changed in him over the course of that scene. It's like, I kind of want to dive into every shot with you, and maybe that's not the one to do it with, but would it be worth saying a word on kind of maybe their scenes together, whether it's on the watchtower or whether it's that one in the car, because it feels different, the language of their connection.
Yeah, the carriage one was something that Clint had an idea from the beginning. I don't remember exactly why, but it was something that for him was really important about just basically drifting the camera towards her while you're seeing that interaction, and then suddenly just going back to him and just hearing her saying their things. And I feel like it was also a bit to allow the narration back then to come back in. But I don't think maybe you can tell a bit more about
I mean, it's really like when we were also talking about it. Like, yeah, there was more narration in that, and this is just part of the iterative process. Like, that had a bunch of narration over it, that scene. But then Carrie, and I just told her, like, I don't just say some stuff about glaciation. And she's like, what do you want? And then I gave her some, I forgot, and then I gave her some stuff the night before, and she's like, yeah, this is great, I can do this. And then she just did it, so it was so beautiful that I was like, all right, well, there goes the narration. You don't need that anymore. But we were really talking about it of like, it's like a car shot, and we've seen 15,000 car shots, and so how do you do it in such a way where it's like, where it is kind of, to your point, what you said, it's like accentuating the change that he's going through, but also like giving us the feeling as viewers through the way the camera's moving that he's feeling, of like kind of an interest in this person or something's different about this person. All these people have wandered in and out of his life, and some have blown up and got fallen trees on them and all this, but like this person's kind of different. And so how do you do that while also trying to mix up the language of a shot in a car, but not do it over the top in a way where it's like calling too much attention to itself and it ruins the moment, this very emotional moment that's going on.
And another kind of reference that seems to be there visually is just, it's there in the aspect ratio, but like photography of that era and their compositions, they're done at a real distance, like some of the scenes with Carrier that way, a lot of the logging scenes have been much later, that whole scene that plays out kind of in a single shot. Talk about maybe your visual references, which I assume are not cinematic, but maybe more period research or something.
They're both. We talked a lot about, Adolpho and I talked a lot about Tarkovsky, just the way that he moved the camera and the way that he treated nature and things like that. But do you want to talk about some of the visual references with both?
Yeah, I feel like the aspect ratio for us was going back to that thing about memory, and because 3:2 is basically the aspect ratio that you use to see pictures on, so whenever you look into your old family photos, that's probably the aspect ratio you're gonna see. So we thought that would be a good aspect ratio to bring back that feeling of watching basically those pictures moving and those memories of someone that you might not have known, and you're trying to piece together all those pictures that you see through his life to get an impression of who he was. And we also talked a lot about Dorothea Lange's pictures, especially from the Great Depression, because there was something about the way she portrayed those horrible moments in a beautiful way also, and because we were talking about grief and of destruction also in nature, we thought that it would be interesting to bring back a bit of what she did back then with framing, and like having smaller faces and a lot of headroom around those characters, and that was also an opportunity to bring nature in a strong way to the movie, because again, nature is also a character in the movie, and we wanted to portray it as so. So it's basically shooting two characters together whenever Joe is there logging and not just shooting trying to make nature be a character. But
You use no lights too, right?
that's true. Yeah, I feel like it comes from the feeling. I mean, for me, I feel like it's so hard sometimes to connect with period pieces because that feels so distant. Like whenever you're watching and okay, they talk in a different way, they dress in a different way, they like everything is just so different. And I feel like being as naturalistic as possible would maybe help the audience being able to connect. And also, I always feel like it's so hard for me to be here in front of the lights, in front of the camera, and I'm always thinking like, how do they do that? And I feel like having, I mean, you're already dressed in a weird way and talking a different way. Not having a bunch of lights around you might help, I don't know. But so I feel like having a smaller footprint would probably help. So I feel like it's a bit of everything. Our goal visually to be able to be as faithful as possible to nature and to what you get on those locations likewise, but also to have a smaller footprint to allow them to do their thing, so just don't get in the way.
When we were doing Scenes by the Fire, Bill and I and John Gill, and there was no extra lighting to that scene, and this sense of not even knowing where Adolpho and the camera was started to actually just feel quite intimate at the end of the evening as it was in the story, not knowing where everyone was and just knowing that it was being captured, but not exactly knowing where from.
As sort of a last question, I love, Joel, what you were saying earlier, that this movie kind of dignifies characters from history who don't have stories told about them unless they were something exceptional. It's like about the unexceptional and how it's sort of relatable. But like, I was kind of thinking, watching it this time, about how the thing that your character does, going off on these jobs, it's like a truck driver or something like that today, but it's also like someone who works on movies, and how like each of you has a personal life that you leave behind and kind of like go off and have to do this and come back to. And I'm curious if that thing that I felt occurred in any way to you in the way that these characters are kind of living.
Oh yeah, that was definitely one of the connections I felt to it. I feel like my life is slightly more extraordinary to other people than Robert's life is. A lot of people think my life's all very glamorous, and there are elements to that, sure, but whatever privileged seat I sit in, I still have to wrestle with these things. It's like, I feel like even if that's someone who goes 45 minutes or an hour down the street, down the road to work, the guilt you feel about disconnection with kids, and I'm constantly wrestling with that and going, all right, well, how does my work life change now that I have 4-year-old kids and I can't take them out of school, and how much am I willing to go away from them because I care about a project enough to split my life between work and family. And I think we all wrestle with that in our own ways, that we've got to go make money, and children don't really understand that, and we're trying to harmonise those two worlds.
Felicity, Bill, would you want to add anything to that, or should we end on that thought?
It's pretty much a gypsy's life, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something we all empathise with the story in the film. Yeah, as you say, you're constantly negotiating, going away from home. But I actually was really looking forward to it because I live in a really urban part of London. So the thought of being in the middle of nowhere with some nice streets was a pretty nice job. So I'm happy to sign on.
Last teeny question: where is this? Where are we seeing? Like, where is America still unspoiled enough to sort of?
Oh, well, Washington State with a VFX supervisor. But it is beautiful. It's Washington.
Warner Brothers backlog. These scenes on the ground.
It's all
Outside of Spokane, and by the way, like an incredible, hats off to every single crew member and heads of department on this film for for managing to achieve what they achieved. And it seems incredibly hard planning. This is sort of my celebration of Adolpho and Clint's relationship, that there was so much planning that went into select these locations that everything felt suitable. But the two of them have the most kind of harmonious director cinematographer relationship I've ever seen, in terms of their ability to trust each other and think, almost like they've been siblings for 100 years, and the way that Clint was able to deputise Adolpho in those moments, and incredible confidence to know when to delegate and to trust the great people that he'd sort of gathered together. And just such a great spirit behind all of that. It was not just, I think, a good result, which we all hope for, I think, as people making the film, but a really very special process.
It's such a unique and beautiful film that results, it's the kind of film that everyone will have access to because of Netflix, but if you sort of felt a special connection to the way you saw it tonight, there's, I guess, limited engagements where it will be showing on 35mm, so your job as my fellow evangelist for this movie is that they can feel it this way. Thank you